Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, and welcome to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm Marie Stella, your host from Melbourne, Australia. Let's start the show.
Hello and welcome back to the show. In an era where our smartphones and social media pages have become extensions of ourselves, it's no surprise that the age-old dance of courtship has found a new stage with new methods of performance, if you will. And gone are the days of the commonplace meet cute. Today, we swipe, we like, and we type. And this shift from in-person to online flirtation represents far more than a mere change in medium. It's a fundamental transformation of flirting etiquette and norms. All this is just so fascinating, and it's exactly what we'll be exploring in this episode. And joining us on this discussion is licensed marriage and family therapist Anna Elton. She's also a certified sex therapist, a Ph.D. candidate in clinical sexology, and most impressively, the author behind several therapeutic books such as I Deserve More. So welcome to the show, Anna. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased that you're here to guide us through this. But before we begin, tell us a bit about your background and what sparked your interest in sex therapy.
So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I worked with many couples, and by default, a lot of families couples come to me because of the degree. And as I worked with couples, I noticed patterns, but also according to research, why couples fight, potentially break up. Three main areas, right? Number one is finances. Number two is intimacy. And number three, it's actually tied between parenting, chores, and in-laws. So by default, intimacy was something that's important in couples therapy. That's why when I decided to go back to get my PhD, I chose clinical sexology. And I know it's not a popular degree, but I think it's very needed, especially in relationships.
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle. And as a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist, what would you say is a common misconception about flirting?
So when we think of flirting, we think of something romantic, something more, right? While we flirt. But in reality, people flirt all the time, right? When they smile, it can be just friendly flirting. It can be sign of appreciation. And I feel like we flirt more than we realize every single day.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I think myself, along with several other people in the world, we all kind of perceive ourselves as people who are incapable of flirting or like not very good at flirting, not realizing that certain like subtle things that we do is considered flirting. But I'm really excited to flesh this out further with you and go further into detail about what is considered flirting and how it's perceived and what it's like in today's world with all the smartphones, all the social media, all the the emotional infidelity and that sort of stuff. But before we do that, I would love to get to know you better. So this is Have You Met Anna? And my first question for you is, what is your favorite book?
So I've been reading a lot of books, and lately it's been mostly professional books, right? Because I like to learn. And so the latest book I read was Helen Fisher. And again, this is where, Helen Fisher, anthropologist who learned about love. And she published multiple books. I heard about the book. I read some of her articles in research, but I wanted to get the actual book.
Yeah.
So,
and what are the biggest lessons you learned from her books?
So what's interesting, usually when we feel attracted, right? Or like when we think of someone, And when our brain is triggered, usually what triggers is smell, right? When you think of walk into the house and you smell apple pie and you think of your mom, right? Or you feel of home or anything like that. But in romantic love, what triggers it is the image. So it's the sight, which is different and which is really, really interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And what about movies? Have there been any that you've enjoyed recently?
So I work a lot. I have 3 kids. So sometimes I have to watch what they want to watch. And we just recently watched Home Alone. I know it's a classic, but everyone loves it.
Yeah, it definitely is a classic, which I actually haven't watched yet. Did you enjoy it?
It's fun. I mean, I watched this movie so many times and I watched as a child and I'm a young adult, right? And then now as a mom.
Yeah. And what about podcasts? Are there any that you're listening to at the moment?
So I like the science of happiness. So I'm really interested in positive psychology and I always come from solution focused lens in therapy and just in general, when I'm thinking about, happiness and happy thoughts, I'm also considering the ants. Ants are automatic negative thoughts
Yeah.
and they're frequent and actually more frequent than positive thoughts. So a lot of clients come in with the negative mindset. So I think happiness is something that is not just there. We need to practice that muscle and we really need to focus to stay more positive and mindful.
Yeah. And what are your favorite things about this podcast?
So I looked at some of the episodes, right? And I really like that you bring people from all around the world, right? And you are interested in something that is needed, crucial, and timely. And I feel
Yeah.
like this topic is very timely at this time.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Thanks for sharing that. And as for role models, is there anyone that you look up to either in your professional life or your personal life?
So professional life, right? They're actually, as relationship therapist, I was looking at Esther Perel. She is the relationship therapist, and she's the first one. So she's the author of a couple of books, and the first one that she released, bestseller, right, translated to million copies. So Mating in Captivity. And so what's interesting about her work, she introduced the erotic intelligence,
Yeah.
and that's where like it's leading into intimacy, and then on sex therapy, I guess agenda or like field, Emily Nagoski, Come As You Are and Then Come Together, the newer book.
Yeah. And what do you find admirable about her?
About Esther Perel.
Yeah.
So she is the one who brings something interesting to relationship therapy field, but mostly she focuses on long-term couples. And in long-term couples, desire usually diminishes, right? And the reason why I really like her work is where she introduces the basic concept, or like the first concepts of erotic intelligence. Where in my research right now, I would like to think that I'm continuing her research and just like looking into what can we do and how can we maintain and sustain that desire in long-term relationships and what is desire. So I came up with my own work and my concept of relational desire.
Yeah, that's amazing and a fascinating person to look up to as a professional in the field. But aside from that, has there been a course or a class that you've taken in your lifetime that has inspired you or stuck with you to this date?
So I'm really, really interested in emotional intelligence. And I know everyone's talking about emotional intelligence, EQ, what's your EQ? And it's, now been translated to kids success, right? They say that, it's not how smart you are, but how emotionally intelligent you are, really translates to success in the future. And I think the research says 60% shows that if you're emotional intelligence, that will lead to success. And same thing in your relationships, in your workplace, and where you look, emotional intelligence is really, really important. So that's where I was definitely really interested in exploring more.
Yeah, for sure. And how has that affected your work now?
So, an emotional intelligence is something that I always bring to my couples, bring to my individuals. And in reality, we don't realize that how important it is and that we need emotional intelligence every single day. And then I usually show them techniques and different exercises, how they can practice emotional intelligence. And I feel like emotional intelligence is similar to social skills. Some people are just naturally have better social skills, others have to practice it. Right? Same with emotional intelligence. Some are just natural emotional intelligence, others need to learn and practice it every single day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I reckon that we need a good deal of emotional intelligence as well to either flirt or realize that we're flirting. So I'm really excited to learn more about this in conjunction with flirting as well. So for starters, how would you define relationships?
So relationship is a dynamic between two people, sometimes more, right? But in our context, we're looking at mainly romantic relationships, but it can be friendships, it can be parent-child relationship, it can be even relationship with yourself, right? I feel like we talk about self-love a lot nowadays, and I think it's not just intimacy, but it's everywhere.
Yeah. And how would you define flirting?
So flirting is something that, as I mentioned, do very often, right? And it actually comes in two forms, right? There's verbal and nonverbal cues,
Yeah.
and we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. And what do you think is the importance of flirting, especially in the process of courtship, or, at least recognizing, being able to recognize when you're flirting?
So in any relationships, when we start, I think flirting is really, really important. First of all, it makes everything lighter, right? We flirt, we smile. When we flirt, we usually smile more, right? When we flirt, we usually make eye contact. And there's this really interesting thing. And again, like I don't look at a lot of social media, but TikTok had this triangular method of flirting, which is I don't know, it got a lot of thousands or millions of likes and shares, reshares. So the way it works, it's when you look at left eye, then the right eye, then the mouth, then left eye again. So you make this triangle, and which is interesting, right? So all the research shows that when you like someone, you get more oxytocin, right? And potential endorphins and all the feeling good hormones, right? Which creates the bond and attraction with the person, right? And what I was thinking also, like all the old movies, right? They look, the guy and the girl meet and they really like each other and they have this long stare, they look each other in the eyes. And what's interesting, this is where like the whole research comes in and say that like it is important to make eye contact. And then when you make the prolonged eye contact, you can actually release endorphins that are associated with that long-term bonding.
Yeah. And with that in mind, how do you think technology has transformed the way that people flirt and connect and form romantic relationships?
Well, technology is interesting, right? It's there to connect. It's there to be easy and accessible. With technology, I guess the original technology, introduced the dating sites. And when I was doing the research on, technology, I just worked on the book, and again, I'll share it in a little bit. But original technology and all the websites came out in 1960s. That's when they started like looking into the dating algorithm, right? And when they introduced the social media and dating sites, originally we had the chat rooms. So you don't see the person, there's nothing, you just text, right? And cyber flirting, right? The digital flirting. What's interesting, it creates the new game. It's the play. And I believe research from 2003, which I know we 20 years ago, what they said, they mentioned that it was the fantasy. So it was really fun and exciting because you're fantasizing. You don't see the person, but you're fantasizing. And also there's ungating effect where you are there, right? And then you can share more because you don't know the person and you don't have that physical space. Also, when you flirt in digital space, it's easier, a lower stakes, because if someone rejects, you can just move on. So, which is good and bad, right? With all the swipes and likes. And then with how easy it is, but also how difficult it is, because sometimes it can lead to other problematic areas.
Yeah, and I've also heard from a lot of friends who have had the experience of trying to date online for a really long time, and after a while feeling very just disconnected from the people that they were flirting with and discouraged from actually finding love. So, what are your thoughts on the psychological and social implications of um, purely digital flirting as compared to flirting in person?
So online, what happens, and I guess right now, like we have the new terms as situationship, right? Back in the day, it was relationship. Now we have situationship, which is usually 30 or so days of the relationship, right? It's quick, it's hot, and it's gone. So we have a lot of choices, right? And sometimes too many choices. And especially in women, they may reject potential candidates because they know there could be something better. And that's the whole fear of missing out effect comes in, because you're always thinking maybe there's something better. So we need to consider that. Also, in digital flirting, we need to think of the love bombing, right? With love bombing, that's when a lot of compliments, a lot of stuff comes in, and then you're not able to sustain it long term, right? It needs to be gradual. It needs to be enough, but not too much. And also because you can share with someone who you don't know, right? A lot, that sometimes it can be too much.
And how do you think that, the rap that online flirting and online romances has gathered over the years? How do you think this has affected the general public's perception of flirting?
So over the years, flirting was something that is associated with connection, with romance. Right now, I feel like at this time, it can be a little different because the boundaries are crossed, and some people don't even realize when it's appropriate versus not appropriate to flirt. What I seen, or like what I heard from some clients, that Tinder, right, is known app for connecting and hookups, right? Where we have LinkedIn, where we connect with professionals and we post our resumes. Sometimes some people with maybe lacking of emotional intelligence can mix the two, and then you
Yeah.
get what you get.
So you've shared some examples of real world flirting with the subtleties and the smiles, but what are some examples of digital flirting? What are some of the things that we might say when we're flirting online?
So I feel like the first one, and as I was thinking about the show, remember, I don't know, like the Facebook, the big platform. I think the first flirting thing was there is poking, right? You poke someone, that's how you flirt, right? And I feel like it's the older generations, they used to poke, and that's how you flirt. But now, like, what do you see is emojis, right? You can flirt with emojis, with smiley faces, with kissy faces, right? You can flirt by liking someone's photo, right? Sending them DMs, which can potentially make the connection, but also if boundaries are blurred, right, it can clearly lead to digital infidelity. And then what is digital infidelity? I feel like it's the new gray area that not everyone is aware of and not everyone is connected on.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about what digital infidelity is. Obviously, there would be some flirting involved, right? So, what does this usually look like? What would someone feel if they are, I don't know, inadvertently, I guess, partaking in this digital infidelity?
I mean, first of all, you need to define what is digital infidelity within a relationship, right? And I definitely heard from one partner would say, like, what are you talking about? It's nothing, right? But then another partner will come in and say like, well, I feel like it's inappropriate when you send or receive message from someone from another gender, opposite gender at 2 a.m., right? So, or if the messages are with some, hearts or smiley faces, right? And obviously the pictures and liking Instagram, right? I feel like it's a big one. They say like, well, you were just following this influencer and then I don't feel comfortable, or someone posted a photo in bikini and I don't feel comfortable you liking that photo. And just sometimes texting, that connection, starts with just talking can lead to really getting to know each other, and then can potentially lead to physical infidelity. The problem is, what if that person is in a relationship, in a committed relationship, right? So there's a lot of blurred lines in digital infidelity space.
Yeah. And what are some other things that someone should consider when engaging in digital flirting apart from the, potential infidelity part of it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, first of all, and again, like connecting to infidelity is your intention. Why are you doing this? What are you hoping to get out of this? Is it validation? Is it connection? Are you trying to get someone closer, or are you trying to give them like showing your support, for example, right? And then also transparency, right? You want to make sure that you're transparent about your intentions. And boundaries. I feel like boundaries is a huge one, because you need to know like what's your relationship status and what's the other person's relationship status.
Yeah, I just imagine a good rule of thumb with regards to intention and the transparency part of it that you just mentioned would be, if you're engaging in some interaction with someone of the gender of which you're attracted to, and they aren't sharing any, secrets or anything like that, but you're still you don't want to like you wouldn't be comfortable showing this to your partner, that may be a sign that you're potentially engaging in some flirting. But are there any guidelines as well that you can think of?
I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking, especially if you're deleting the messages. If you have the urge to delete the message so your partner doesn't see by chance, I think it's a problem, right? This is one you need to go back to the basics and figure out like what's going on. Why do I feel like I cannot show it to my partner? Maybe I should have the open conversation with my partner, right? Being transparent. Is there like boundaries being crossed on my end or the other person's end? Because sometimes, people with people pleasing tendencies, right, which can be coming from your bringing, they can say no. And that can definitely lead to blurred boundaries, right? It's not even your intention to engage in flirting. You just don't know how to stop it.
Yeah, and circling back to digital flirting as a whole and what you mentioned before about, how it can be the fantasizing that's really exciting for someone when flirting digitally. Aside from that, and, the potential for someone to be in a relationship, what else should people realize or consider when they want to flirt with someone online?
So one thing that I feel like been coming up a lot in my practice is catfishing, right? And I feel like catfishing came up after, especially increased after during COVID and after COVID, right? Because people wanted to connect, people wanted to talk, people wanted to connect. So, and of course, they were looking for love. So, catfishing can be, can take different forms, but this is the whole idea is being deceived by this person, right? They have bad intentions, right? And again, with catfishing, it could be the way they position themselves, right? Maybe this is not the real person. Maybe they show a lot of interest and I guess intention, love bombing, right? And it feels good, right? It validates you, right? It boosts your self-esteem for the moment. And sometimes you don't know what to do, but this is where you just accept the person. But then also another part of it, I definitely had clients coming in and they said like, well, this relationship was so exciting, a lot of attention. I didn't realize I was love bombed. And then the person left. So it was boom and bust, right? A lot of excitement and then people left. So we definitely want to make sure that we are looking for red flags, right, when we accept flirting, but also when we engage in flirting.
Yeah, that actually leads me perfectly into my next question, which is how do people tend to present themselves online versus their actual offline persona? What are some things that we should consider in this area?
There's been a lot of research done on that, right? So we have our perfect self. We have their I guess we create this illusion of perfection online with all the social media, with all the filters that people use, right? And then the highlight effect, right? So highlight reel, that's when we only post the best version of ourselves, right? When you look on social media, everyone's is always on vacation, right? Everyone's always doing something fun. So also, sometimes people post their old photos, right? And I feel like I seen it in same-sex couples. What they complained about, especially when they were trying to open the relationship, they say they being deceived because people don't look like their photo when they meet them in person. So, and also you need to make sure that like if you create this persona, this is really authentic you and you can maintain it, because if you perceive, or if you make someone perceive you a certain way and then it does not meet the expectation, this relationship would not last and it will not be genuine and authentic. So you need to make sure that whatever you present, it's as close as possible to who you are.
Yeah. And what's the importance of balance here? Just because I'm thinking when I was back like a couple years ago and I was dating a lot, and I would do this thing because I actually had a little bit of pet peeve about how people were always presenting themselves as different than what they actually are online versus offline. And I wanted to do it a little bit differently, but I kind of go in the opposite direction and take it way too far and kind of just highlight my flaws way too early on in the dating stages. And my therapist at the time pointed out that that is like fear of being rejected, like I'm setting myself up kind of for failure and to let people know like, hey, this is what you're walking into. But is it actually a good thing? Not necessarily, because you're not like giving yourself the space to grow and you're like highlighting all of your flaws in advance, and it's not necessarily healthy either. So what would be the balance here?
So when you share, you want to, again, like it's a balance, right? You don't want to overshare, right? So communication is the key. So whenever you want to say something, of course, you want to highlight your accomplishments, all the good things, right? You can mention, a couple of things, but again, like you don't want to over highlight the negatives, because the whole idea of neuro linguistic programming, for example, if you say, well, I'm not good enough, I don't know why you like me. If you keep saying this to someone who does not even believe that, it can become the reality, right? It's the illusionary effect, right? So you keep hearing, well, this person's not good enough. I don't know why. I don't know why you wouldn't like me. And then the partner would say, like, would start thinking, like, why am I liking you? I don't know. It's hard to tell. So you want to make sure that one thing that I always tell my husband, I usually say, well, I'm so happy for you that you have to do this, when I ask him to do the chore. Or when I ask him, like I say, like, well, you're so lucky to have me as a wife. So, which is a good thing because I'm actually more solution focused and I'm programming my husband to be in a better space. But then I'm not saying anything that will kind of lead him in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's great. And for those who didn't grow up with easily accessible internet and are not quite used to flirting in a digital space, what advice do you have for overcoming the anxiety? Where do you think people should start?
You need to start simple, right? I think using humor is always nice, right? When you like, it needs to be something light, maybe a compliment, but I guess moderation is a key. You want to make sure that you're not going into the path of love bombing, because it can be really easy. Because if it's working, the person is accepting your compliment, you will think, okay, this is working, let me do more, and then it's kind of hard to stop. So it needs to be the boundary. And also, if the person, you need to kind of read the room, right? But also, if the person is, it's kind of hard to say sometimes, right? Because you don't see the person's expression, face expression, and body language. But if the conversation kind of gets stuck, maybe you need to stop, right? Because you want to make sure that you're respectful of the boundaries of another person.
Yeah. And with regards to reading the room and, moderation is key and everything, there is kind of a general consensus with digital flirting that you shouldn't like double text or triple text. Like people have fear about doing that. What are your thoughts on double texting and triple texting?
So I would say we have this anxiety with digital space is when you send someone a text and you see that they read it, but they did not respond it. Or you send a text, they did not respond, but they are on their social media active. Now you're thinking, what's going on? Are they mad at me? They don't like me anymore. Did they overstep the boundaries? Maybe I said something wrong. So this is when you need to pause, give the person the space. You can always ask to talk on the phone because this way you definitely have a little bit more. You have the your voice, the tone, right? I mean, ideally to do the FaceTime so you can see all the aspects, right? You have verbal cues and nonverbal cues there, right? But again, I would say just stop, give it, give the person some space, and then I would say, would it be like a couple of hours? Would it be just like reach out again the next day and just ask for just a phone call or a FaceTime?
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you so much for teaching us all about digital flirting and what we should consider. Now let's talk about some ethical considerations in digital flirting. What are some general rules around flirting etiquette in the digital space? How do we apply the flirting etiquette that we once had in physical spaces and put that into online mediums?
So I would say the first one is to respect boundaries, right? If someone tells you, I don't feel comfortable, right? Don't continue with texting that because then I feel like sometimes people, would go on these dating sites. And I know that each dating site is different. One is for like, hooking ups, right? Others for more like meeting your long term partner. But again, sometimes people mix up, how you supposed to, talk there, right? And when just say, hi, how are you? And then, an hour into, this new communication, you send something inappropriate, maybe you should not do that, right? Because this is just not something you should do, right? You want to slowly get to know someone. And there's this social penetration model, right? So that's when there are different levels of depth of the conversation, right? This is communication model. When you start with something simple, you're getting to know their name, what they do, their likes, dislikes. Similar what we did here. The what movie do you like? Is there anyone that inspires you, like, or anything else? And then you go more into deeper conversation. So I would say when you flirt, first you need to get to know the person before you go into something more intimate. So I would say another one, you need to be clear about your intention and content. Like what you're doing, like when you're doing it. What's your intention? Are you just trying to meet someone, for a drink and for the night, and that's it, or you're actually looking to make it into more something meaningful? I would say the relationship status, right? If someone reaches out on social media and, say like, hey, how are you? And then you respond and you're being nice, but then they keep pushing or, they keep making the comments, and which clearly, if you're married, in a relationship and they keep, sending like, especially to women, right? Men do that all the time. They send, sometimes they say like, hey, cutie, or like something else, which can be considered, then again, like leading to jealousy of the partner, right? And I heard it from clients. They say like, how come he is reaching out to you? Is there something you said? And they said, no, like there's nothing. I did not even respond, but the person was keep reaching out and keep reaching out, right? So you need to be mindful of that relationship status and also your own, because I also heard from a number of clients that their partners were married to them and then also on dating sites, meeting other people. And then I guess moderation, right? You don't want to have this love bombing or the intensity of that flirting, right? You say hi, and then if the person's responding, you can, but also, just think of, what you're saying and how you're saying and how often you're saying it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really, really useful. I personally feel like, setting intentions is so underrated. It's not something that everyone does, but it really should be, or at least for like majority of cases, because sometimes people genuinely don't know what they're after, but they could easily say that from the start as well, and that really helps to get people on the same page. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. Now let's go into the practices and habits section. So what is a habit that you recommend practicing when engaging in digital flirting?
So you want to make sure that you're being genuine, right? You make sure, and always, I mean, I always recommend my couples, especially long-term couples, to flirt with each other. Super important, right? Because what happens, you start with, something playful. And then when you're married, long-term relationship, your texts, how do they look like? What's your flirting looks like? What's for dinner? What should I pick up at the store? And when I talk to my younger clients, they're like, wow, that's really sad. So I feel like, first of all, please flirt with your partner, not just when you're trying to meet someone new, but when you're in a relationship, definitely helps to rekindle that sparkle, to keep that spark alive, right? So please do it. Also, I would say do it light, do it fun, and use some humor. But again, don't too much, not a lot of humor, not too much, because some people just don't take it. Yeah, you just want to make sure you're being mindful. Remember, moderation is the key. And let's see, what else would I say? And just see how the person responds.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people also struggle with the confidence part of digital flirting. So, what are some practices they can do to strengthen this, the confidence a little bit better?
So I'll tell you this, there's no right or wrong way to flirt online, but it is easy because, it's not going to be face to face rejection, right? What's the worst thing that can happen? People will stop responding, they will ghost you. Happens all the time. Not even in flirting, but in workspace, right? I heard this from clients where they said, reached out, had the interview, never heard back. So ghosting is normal. What's the worst thing that can happen? So I would say start small, start slow, be genuine, and just practice that skill. And especially see what you're willing to say and then what the other person is willing to accept. I feel like it's so important that you meet somewhere. But again, like you need to start small because some people, they really enjoy sexting, right? This is when it creates, I guess, opens the room for more fantasies and more, sexualization, eroticism, right? For other people, they just don't feel comfortable with that. And again, is it digital or not? They just don't feel comfortable saying those things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. It's been such a pleasure to have this chat with you. Now let's move on to the open mic section. This is your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. So the floor is entirely yours. Please take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm really interested right now in, as I mentioned, in relational desire. So, and this is how it started. I started seeing a lot of clients coming in with diminished desire over long-term relationships, right? So it starts exciting, hot in the beginning of the relationship. You want to spend a lot of time with each other. And then as things progress, sometimes people stop even liking each other, right? They coming from the passionate lovers, right, to roommates who don't even like each other. So that's why I was thinking, okay, so this is an important topic that can help a lot of people. And this is part of the work in my PhD program, where I was looking at, what is the desire? What is love, right? What is passion? What is the commitment? And then how do you maintain this passion and desire? Because what I've been seeing, people just don't, stop being intimate with each other, right? And the research shows that sexless marriage is when you're intimate with your partner 10 or less times per year. And there are a lot of sexless marriages. At least what I see in couples, I guess they come in because they need help. And then how do you keep that desire? And then how do you maintain that connection?
Yeah, that's really interesting. But I do wonder, with sexless marriages, is it normal to go through phases like this? For example, like if you're having a kid, is it normal for maybe 1 or 2 years at the start of the child's life to not have as much sexual activity?
Absolutely. Because, what happens, first you meet, you flirt a lot, right? You have this spontaneous desire. But then as you commit, you have a lot of stressors, work, bills, kids. So you simply don't have time, you don't have energy. It's really hard. But as long as you continue that connection, right? And then, especially for women, they're going through a lot, their body going through the pregnancy, breastfeeding, right? Taking care of the child. So usually their desire goes down, right? And then also medication can affect desire, and also the menopause, right? Women going through menopause, it's the whole process of potential diminished desire. So you need to take in consideration a lot of factors. But then also, if you don't get anything from your partner, right? If they stop flirting with you, if they stop showing you the desire, you don't have any desire.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think another part of it is also, if your partner doesn't show desire for you, even though they do have that desire, there's no way really for you to know that you're being desired, and then you think you're not being desired. And so I suppose like a big part of that is purely just communication, which would solve a lot of it. But yeah, relational desire sounds really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, and all the best with pursuing more of that in your career. And thank you for joining us today. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
They can go on my website. It's www.annalmft.com. And from there, they can go on my Psychology Today blog, Life, Love, etc. on Psychology Today. And I also have the show on relationships, also Life, Love, etc. So it's easier to find. But again, it's all accessible on my website.
Amazing. We'll link those in the show notes or the YouTube description, whichever you're watching or listening from. Thank you for everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at re.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.